just before 9 o'clock. All right, everybody, thank you very much for coming today. Chief Naval Operations Admiral Mike Gilday will make some brief opening remarks, and then we'll take questions. And Admiral Sir,
good afternoon. I'm the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Mike Gilday, and I'm here with Admiral Phil Sobeck, the Expeditionary Strike Group 3 commander. Phil has been the local commander here at the pier for the fire since its outbreak on Sunday. Since Sunday, we've been working tirelessly to get this fire under control, and I'm glad to say that all known fires in the ship have been extinguished as of yesterday. The ship is stable. I'd like to thank all of those who have played a role in combating the fire on board Bonhomme Richard for these past days. We appreciate the quick and immediate response of the over 400 sailors from 16 San Diego Bay ships, helicopter crews from our squadron HSC-3 over at North Island, our Coast Guard partners, local and federal firefighters, and other industry experts who have helped us over the past days. A big thank you to the people of San Diego, of National City, Coronado, and all the other communities in San Diego for their continued support. It's truly been an all-hands effort, and we are grateful. This morning, I had the opportunity to visit the USS Bonhomme Richard. I wanted to see the ship firsthand, the extent of the damage. I also wanted to talk to those who fought the fire. I also wanted to visit the Emergency Operations Center, which was really our command and control node for this incident, and meet with several sailors and civilians who have fought this fire relentlessly. As we move forward, there will be thorough investigations that will determine the next steps in a variety of areas. Make no mistake, we will follow the facts of what happened here. We'll be honest with ourselves, and we'll get after it as a Navy. My intention is for the investigations to be made available to the public when they are completed. Additionally, our four-star fleet commanders issued a message a few days ago that directs every ship in the Navy to ensure that our equipment is ready, that our people are well trained, and that our procedures are rehearsed so we can all learn from this tragedy. Just a few other remarks, if I would. As I walked through the ship today, this morning, I essentially went 4 decks below the flight deck and then went up to the flight deck. I took a look at the superstructure. I was able to get a good sense of the extent of the damage, and the damage is extensive. There is obviously electrical damage to the ship, there's structural damage to the ship, and mechanical damage to the ship that we need to assess in much more detail before we make a final determination of next steps. I know that everybody is interested in the future service of this ship. I am 100% confident that our defense industry can put this ship back to sea. But having said that, the question is, should we make that investment in a 22-year-old ship? And I'm not going to make any predictions until we take a look at all the facts and we follow the facts, and we can make reasoned recommendations up the chain of command on the future steps, any repair efforts, future repair efforts with Bonhomme Richard. The biggest takeaway for me today was really the people, and in particular, I went into a theater where I met with fire crews that are getting ready to go aboard the ship. The words that, as I left that theater, and it was quite a humbling experience to meet with them. Average age was in the early 20s, but an even mix of male and females. And as I spoke to them and I asked them to tell me some of their stories, very humble group, but as they spoke to me, it became obvious to me their resiliency, their fearlessness, their confidence, and lastly, their competence were 4 words that I could use to describe the sailors in that group. And they represent there were probably 150 in the room that represent more than 400 that have gone into the fire again and again and again. In particular, one petty officer that I singled out, she's a 3rd class petty officer. I don't know her exact age. Her name's ABH-3 Craig. She's an aviation bosun's mate. She has been into the fire 7 times. She was getting ready to go in for the 8th time. And to hear her talk about her preparedness for this incident, the fact that the training that she had in the Navy since boot camp, where it's absolute priority that every sailor and every officer be able to fight fires and to combat flooding. That training set the foundation for the way she operated and behaved and acted over the past several days. She was very proud of what she did, and the teamwork that was involved with these small teams that were going in to fight the fire, and they were a mixture of sailors from the Bonhomme Richard, sailors from other ships, federal and local firefighters, in an environment where you could really only see 2 feet in front of you. There was no lighting. There was deep, heavy smoke. Most of you saw that smoke coming off the ship on Sunday and Monday. And to go into that environment again and again and again, temperatures at some point in excess of 1,000 degrees. One federal firefighter told me that the temperature recorded was 1,200 degrees on Monday. We really thought that we had this fire under control, or had the potential to have the fire under control and out as early as Sunday night. There are 2 things, I think, having walked through the ship and listened to the firefighters, that struck me as major impediments to that happening. The first was the wind coming off of the bay. And this fire probably couldn't have been in a worse point on the ship in terms of its source that allowed it to spread up elevator shafts as an example, up exhaust stacks as an example, to take that fire up into the superstructure and then forward. And so I think that the wind was a significant factor. I also think that the series of explosions on the ship, I'm told that one in particular that could be heard 13 miles away, were also significant factors that caused the commanding officer, who was really looking at safety first, he needed to save the ship, he needed to balance that with the safety of the firefighters. And so there were times when he had to back those firefighters off the ship. At one point, the explosion was so great that it blew debris across the ship, across the pier and onto the ship that was across the way. And so I think that the situation was very tenuous. I think that the commanding officer made some very sound decisions in terms of how to attack the fire very deliberately. I think that, again, the teamwork involved from a number of different agencies, I think, belies the fact that the training that we do on a recurring basis, week by week with federal fire, pays off in an incident like this. We've not seen a fire of this magnitude in a Navy ship in recent memory, at least in my career. So very extensive in terms of the damage and the intensity. But I go back to the main takeaway for me this morning was really the people, and we ought to be proud of them. And the parents of those sailors ought to be proud of them in terms of how they stood up and acted. If anybody has any doubts about this generation of sailor, soldier, airman, and Marine, at least for me, they should be put to rest by the heroic and courageous actions of those sailors and those federal firefighters over the past 5 days. So with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
But Julie wants to make a quick-
Yeah, I was wondering if you could tell us the timeline that we're looking at. How long will it take to determine the damage on the ship? How long will the investigation take? All the different timelines that we're looking at.
So this is a good question. There'll be a series of 3 different investigations, and they have to be synchronized. And so the first is a safety investigation that has to occur, and that's part and parcel of any incident that we have on the ship. That'll be led by Naval Sea Systems Command. Naval Criminal Investigative Service will also lead an investigation, as we always do, to make sure there's no malfeasance at the root of the fire. And the third is what we call a command investigation that'll take a look at several echelons in terms of did we have the right procedures in place? Did we react correctly to the fire? Were there things that we could have done differently? Were there things that we should have had in place that we didn't have in place? What do we do right? What do we not do right? And that'll be an important investigation as well. And the last thing that's beginning now is an assessment to take a look at structural, electrical, mechanical damage with experts from industry who actually built the ship, with experts from our public shipyard in Norfolk that actually designed the ship, and experts from Naval Sea Systems Command who have seen structural damage on ship from like incidents before. So they'll be making that determination, this last assessment, on what the next steps are for whether we repair or whether we don't.
Andrew Dyer, EP.
My question is about maintenance availabilities for ships. You know, the fire on the Miami, part of the causal factors was the ducting and cabling that you run through scuttles and hatches. I don't know how you do maintenance on a ship your side without doing that. Is there just a level of assumed risk for maintenance, or how do you address that? How do you do that?
So that's a good question. So when you have a ship in maintenance or mitigation plans in place that the CO and Fed Fire take a look at for every ship, because it's a little bit different, there are quick disconnects in some of those hatches. I can't speak in detail to the procedures or the plans that were in place for Bonhomme Richard, but I will tell you that that plan is one that's agreed upon together by the CO of Bonhomme Richard, who has ultimate responsibility, but also Fed Fire, who assists us with any kind of incidents on base, and they train to those plans and to those procedures with respect to the mitigations in place for every ship's a little bit different in terms of how it's going to be rigged.
Gidget from the SNI.
Hey, sir, thank you very much. I'm interested in, your first thoughts when you realized that you were told that there was a fire on the ship. And what you thought when you saw the first images, it was pretty significant, a lot of smoke billowing out and a lot of unknowns at that time. What was kind of going through your mind, and what would have been kind of the first priorities in that first day or two?
So for me, safety was the #1 priority. I was assured right off the bat that that was the main priority of the commander on the ground as well. The main question I had back in Washington is whether or not we had the right resources in place for the commander to do everything he had to do to get the fire under control. What I didn't realize at the time, what I realized today, and I was talking to the sailors in particular, is that we did not have to make any phone calls to get people to respond to this fire. We had sailors responding in numbers that stayed on scene for days, and we had actually have many of them, we had to order many of them to go home. And so we had a response from the local community. People were moving to the sound of gunfire, if you will. And so the initial concerns that I had about resources turned out to not be an issue at all. The biggest issue was safety.
Yes, sir.
Earlier reporting said this incident kind of makes it was going to force the Navy to reevaluate itself. Can you expand on that?
Sure. And so with an incident of this magnitude, you don't want to have another one like it. So I'm not waiting for this to happen potentially again, because ships are a risky place to work. Maintenance availabilities are higher risk. And so that's why the fleet commanders have gone out, and they've gone out with a very detailed message to say, look, within the next 5 days, I want every CO of every ship to assess the training levels of their people, to assess whether or not their equipment is adequate in terms of operability and in terms of placement, in terms of numbers, right, so that they have the right resources in place if there's a fire. And the last piece of it was whether or not the procedures they have in place, to do an assessment of the procedures they have in place, to red team them, if you will, to make sure that they're adequate. So on board ships, we're doing fire drills every day. We're doing flooding drills every day. And so this is happening across the waterfront. That it's just part and parcel of what every duty section does every day. But it does, and as good as you always think that you are, you're never as good as you think you are. And so that's the real takeaway, to force these COs to just take a sharper look at how they are positioned right now in whatever unique environment that they're in, to make sure that their crews are ready to go.
Hello, Melissa Don, NBC7. How are the sailors doing? Was their home, it's been taken from them.
So for the sailors on Bonhomme Richard, it's a gut punch. So their sailors are home. They identify with that ship, right? With these ball caps, they mean something. The names of those ships mean something to those sailors. As you said, this is their home. This is where they're going to fight from, right, if they have to go to sea. And so for every one of them, it's a personal loss. And so right now, they're dealing with the heat of the moment in terms of making sure that that the environment is safe on board the ship, so that they can get aboard and start cleaning out the debris in terms of the and be ready for the next steps, whatever they might be. But we're keeping a close eye on them. We're conscious of that fact.
All right, we'll take one more question right here.
You mentioned the response of the firefighters and the sailors. So what's missing here? Do you have enough sailors on board to fight a fire that could get out of control so quickly? How much training do you have with surrounding fire departments, which I assume don't have a lot of experience fighting fires on ships, yet they had to respond to this one?
I'll take the last question first. So with respect to Fed Fire, we're working very, very closely with them. I talked to the Fed Fire chief this morning, and I talked to the local commander that worked very closely with Bonhomme Richard. He graded the teamwork as terrific, and so he felt
surrounding fires,
yeah.
like San Diego fire, who had to respond.
So surrounding fire departments deal with unique environments each and every day. And so my understanding is, and we'll find out as a result of the investigations, whether we need to do anything to improve upon that. So I can't answer that directly with respect to Bonhomme Richard right now. My sense is that the response was good, but we can always do better, and we need to take a hard look at it. And the first question was about the size of the duty section, and that's something we're going to take a look at. And so, so whether or not we had an adequate number of people on board for this particular environment, given the fact that the ship was at a certain point in maintenance, that certain equipment could have been inoperable in terms of firefighting equipment. We need to go through this, catalog it all, and get an understanding of whether or not we had it right. And if not, how do we quickly adjust across the fleet to make sure it doesn't happen again?
All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Together because we want to make sure that this issue doesn't just go away.
Justice for having to sacrifice our health due to our skin color, our race, linguistic isolation, income status, and for the zip code we live. What makes this matters worse is how the Navy downplayed the fire as not posing a threat to our public health, stating that it was not toxic.
And with this fire, I could not breathe. I had to leave the city. I literally had to get in my truck and drive north. There needs to be some type of mechanism by which they can contain it on the base, or if nothing else, a plan for communicating to those of us that live around the Navy base.
Alongside our friends at Federal Fire San Diego, we learned that approximately 08:30 this morning, a fire was reported in the lower vehicle storage area on board Bonhomme Richard. While moored pierside here at Naval Base San Diego, the fire was initially engaged by ship's company, and Naval Base San Diego activated their Emergency Operations Center to alert level 3, at which time the Federal Fire Department San Diego Battalion 12, the National City Department, and the San Diego Metro Fire Department responded. As of 16:10 or 4:10 local, there are currently 17 sailors being treated at local hospitals. As you know, this is ongoing, and so we will keep you updated as those numbers change and as releases and the care is being handled. All are in stable condition at this point. USS Bonhomme Richard has reported 100% accountability for their personnel. All personnel were evacuated off the ship earlier today, and there is no ordnance on board, which was our initial concern to make sure safety in and around the ship. An 1,800-foot perimeter has been established around the USS Bonhomme Richard and the surrounding buildings on the base and been evacuated to ensure safety of personnel. The Navy and federal firefighters are currently clearing compartment spaces in order to close in the center of the fire. I just got a report as I walked in that they have actual agent on the fire and that firefighting efforts are actually in hand, and we'll keep that updated as we go. The Port of San Diego Harbor Police Department is conducting firefighting operations utilizing tugs from the sea, from the bay here, and U.S. Coast Guard Station San Diego has established a 1 nautical mile safety zone around Bonhomme Richard and has closed the San Diego Channel south of Coronado Bridge to all boating traffic. Shortly, I'll take your questions to make sure, again, that we give you as much information as we possibly can, as we know right now. But just know that sailors across this waterfront are absolutely doing a magnificent job to save the USS Bonhomme Richard. They're fighting their ship and they're saving their ship. And the resiliency of our sailors and certainly of the team around them, we're seeing just incredible results. And so with that, I'll take any of your questions, and then again, we'll continue to keep you updated as we go through. We'll just do it kind of in order, left to right. Yes, ma'am.
We keep hearing that there were explosions that were at the beginning of this firefight. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, there was a report of an internal explosion. What we cannot ascertain is exactly what that explosion was caused from. Initial reports is sort of a backdraft of an overpressurization as the compartment started heating up. That caused a pressurization, and that was sort of what caused that explosion. Certainly under due caution, we evacuated, reset the perimeter, and then go back and fight the fire and make sure we're good to go. Yes, sir.
Can you go into detail about the shelter in place that you guys currently have right now? What you all tweeted out about an hour ago?
Yeah, the shelter in place really is to maintain that safety perimeter, 1,800 yards around the ship, just to make sure that one we know who enters in to the safety perimeter. We know that we keep everyone safe, just on the absolute mode of precaution in case something does go differently than we anticipate right now. Sir.
I think a lot of sailors have told us fire is one of the more dangerous aspects of being on a ship. Can you go into detail just, I mean, how dangerous is a fire on board a ship like this?
Absolutely. Firefighting, well, the main thing is we're trained from day one when they enter boot camp about how to fight a fire, how to deal with a fire, and understand, live fires really from the first day of boot camp. And so, this is what we're trained to do. Fire in itself in a compartmental space, not knowing where the source of the fire is, like anything else, it's dark, it's uncertain, but again, the training and the efforts, we're starting to see the results. So the team's really doing a great job.
You had 17 injured sailors. Were any of them involved in firefighting? Were they from the flying team or anything like that?
Again, I don't have the specifics on all 17. We'll get those as we go, but as folks were getting from heat exhaustion, smoke inhalation, those sort of things, we want to make sure that, again, they're getting well taken care of. But again, they're in varying facets of today's events. And so once they are getting the care they needed, we make sure they got the best treatment possible. Yes, ma'am.
What can you tell us about the condition of the sailors who were transported to the hospital? I mean, have burns, or I know you just touched.
Yeah, the information I have right now is stable condition, and again, most of them are attributed to smoke inhalation, those types of things. But again, I don't have the facts of all of them, but we'll keep that and keep you updated.
Any concern of a further explosions?
Right. I mean, there's always that concern. That's why we got our friends from San Diego as well as the harbor, making sure that the hull is being cooled simultaneously while they're inside fighting the fire. Again, it's as many access points we can make to make sure that the temperature. We've put some temperature gauges and monitors to make sure we understand where the temperature is, and that right now the risk is low for those secondary explosions. But again, a fire in that kind of environment, we just got to be absolutely, take every precaution possible.
Is this a fuel oil fire, a hazmat fire?
It is. It's classified as a Class A fire, so it's debris that you would find in office spaces, in berthing compartments, basically, cloth, ashy type of fire, and so that's what's fueling it right now. Is all the normal things you would find in a compartment is burning. And so, we don't understand right now the source just yet of what happened this morning. But again, we're fighting, and we're at the seat of the fire, if you will, and we're actually putting agent on it, which is a good sign.
Should the residents of National City be worried with this, smell coming?
Yeah, no, I would say not at all. From a standpoint of, again, we're monitoring both from an EPA standard perspective and making sure that, again, air quality in itself, if we have any sense that it gets into a hazardous condition, we'll certainly make sure everyone's well informed, we understand it. But as you can see, as the shift is changing based on, going from daytime heat into nighttime, as the wind sort of is helping us out with dissipating the fumes, and it's changed quite a bit. And if you look at the type of fire we have, again, ashy fire, there's nothing toxic in there, it's just black smoke. And now, because we're doing the firefighting agent, you're starting to see more whiter smoke, which is a good sign that the fire is being maintained. Sir?
How extensive is the damage inside? Do you think the ship will be able to sail again?
We're actually going to make sure it sails again, but we don't know. And so right now we're going to fight the fire, and then we'll work on understanding about what exactly happened with the fire and where it went to make sure she sails as best as possible in a very near time. And she was already in the shipyard being worked on. So again, she was in a stage of repair anyway. So we're just going to get right back at it once we get this thing contained and put out. Not absolutely clear. We understand down in basically in the lower cargo hold of the ship. It's called a deep V for that class of ship. and it's this huge open area where you store a lot of marine equipment and everything else, and so that's where we believe it started. And then everything above that is where offices and berthing compartments are, and so that's where we want to make sure we contain it. Right now, I think they have roughly 1 million gallons of fuel, well below where any heat source is. And again, that was the priority all day, to make sure that that was not affected.
And do you get know how much it may cost the ballpark range to avoid the damage on that ship?
I'm sorry.
Do you get to know how much the damage will cost yet?
No, I have no idea at this point. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for your time. And again, we'll keep you updated as we know further. And let's keep those sailors, in your prayers and your thoughts. They're doing an outstanding job, and they're representing your country absolutely superbly. Yes, sir.
Are sailors involved in firefighting right now?
You better believe it. You better believe it. Yep. And doing a magnificent job. Just came from the scene, just to kind of echo that real quick. And the sight when you see young men and women wearing the nation's cloth, doing the business in which they were trained to do, it's absolutely amazing. And they're doing it, they're fighting their ship, and they're going to win. So thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any type of maintenance that you guys are going to be doing in other ships to prevent this type of things?
Again, we're going to learn a lot probably from this, like we do with everything when something like this happens. And we'll let that investigation and those lessons be identified before we change anything, obviously. But certainly, we take all the precautions to make sure we have any sort of heat source or anything else in a shipyard environment.
Thank you.